When reading a piece of literature, many people often visualize the story as a movie in their mind. Descriptive visual imagery and an interesting plot might help the reader visualize a story, but like a movie, one of the most important aspects of a novel, essay, poem, or any other piece of literature is the characters. Characterizing people can often be a difficult task because, as humans, there are so many different ways to express ourselves and show the world exactly who we are. When creating a character, this leaves the author with many different techniques to develop these people, ranging from fact listing to behavior description and dialogue to insight into their thoughts. In our daily lives, one of the best ways to get to know someone is by observing their actions, what they say, and how they interact with other people. Great writers can incorporate these real-life approaches into their writing, so by the end of a story, the readers feel like the characters are people that they truly know and are friends with. Throughout the chapter titled The Accident in Gregory Orr's memoir novel The Blessing, he develops his childhood self using many different techniques. After reading this excerpt, young Greg has become a person to me rather than just a character in a random chapter of someone's memoir. This was accomplished solely because of how Orr had utilized a variety of techniques to characterize himself during childhood. This chapter of Orr's memoir focuses on an event that changed his life. The hunting trip where he accidentally killed his brother. Throughout the development of the plot, we as the reader can see how this life-changing event fundamentally altered Greg as a person. When the excerpt begins, we see Greg as a very self-centered person who is only concerned with what he wants and how what other people want will impact him. When his younger brothers plead with their parents to join the hunting trip, Greg automatically considers how it will affect his experience. He comes to believe that the kids, we were certain, were bound to ruin the trip. With them along, we might as well invite Mom too, and even Nancy, who's only 4. Why not bring the dogs and the cats too? Why not have a picnic? In this moment, the reader is being given access to Greg's thoughts, which allows readers to see not who he portrays himself to be or how other people view him, but rather to understand his true self. From Greg's statement that he believes his younger brothers will ruin the hunting trip, we can see how Greg is indifferent to his brother's feelings and instead fixates on it affecting his hunting trip. Orr then employs irony when talking about the possibility of a picnic, which exposes Greg's belief that just like the domesticated animals are incapable of hunting, so are his mother, sister, and younger brother. Since Greg clearly believes that he is qualified to hunt, he sees himself as better than those around him, further exemplifying his selfishness. Since the reader has direct access to Greg's thoughts, they are untainted by the opinions of others and even the self-modification that often occurs during dialogue. These are Greg's real, undiluted thoughts and feelings, which allows us to have a tremendous amount of insight into his personality. After the hunting incident occurred, Greg's coping mechanisms and behaviors continue to expose his characteristics, but also show how he has changed and grown emotionally in this short amount of time. We are once again in Greg's mind, where he states, "I couldn't leave the room. I kept returning to the bed and curling up, clutching my pillow and sobbing into it or crying and biting it. I kept my eyes closed as much as I could, as if by doing that, I could hide from my family and the horrible new reality I had brought into the world. It was as if I thought that by keeping my eyes shut and staying curled up on my bed, I could cancel out the world and the people around me." When reading this excerpt, it seems as though Greg regrets what he did and feels immensely guilty, which is absolutely accurate, but it is contradicted by Orr's word choice. Within these 4 sentences, Greg says the word I 8 times and uses it an additional 7 times throughout the remaining 4 sentences of the paragraph. Most authors avoid repeating and overusing any word, but especially this word. Since Orr is an experienced writer, he is undoubtedly aware of this unofficial rule, which shows the reader that he purposely chose to write I 15 times within 8 sentences, an average of almost 2 times in each sentence. The overuse of the word I continues to display Greg's selfishness that was apparent in the beginning of the story, but this directly contradicts his actions of grief seen during this period after shooting his brother. The juxtaposition of his selfishness and his grief, something completely selfless, prefaces the personal growth and development that Greg undergoes during this experience. During this time period, he is neither selfish nor selfless, but rather has started to grow, which allows Orr to show Greg's selflessness without it being too implausible of a change that readers will view it as impossible and unlikely. After Orr hid in his room by himself, he was eventually coaxed out in order to tell the story of what happened. As guilty and upset as Greg was feeling, at this point in the narrative he finally acknowledged that there are other people who have been affected by his carelessness with guns. After being unable to tell the state trooper what he remembered of the hunting trip, he thought, our neighbors, the town, the county, all those who had a right to know a monster lived among them. And so I spoke the words of my story, confused as it was. I was sick to my stomach with the horror of what I had done, and sick too with the shame of confessing it aloud, and with the fear of punishment that must follow. By deciding to tell the truth in these final sentences of Orr's narrative, Greg finally admits that he made a mistake, and this mistake can really affect other people. In the first sentence, Greg insinuates that he is a monster, which displays his eventual acceptance of his mistake. Similarly to the paragraph on page 3, the last sentence utilizes the word I a lot, but in this context it has a different meaning. Greg is utilizing I in order to accept responsibility for accidentally killing his brother, which sharply contrasts his selfish use of I previously. By choosing to repeat this word again, Orr is making Greg's personal growth from selfish to unselfish comparable to the development of I being used for self-concerned reasons to having a responsibility-seeking purpose. Since the development of the use of I shadows Greg's growth, it shows that he has truly changed, just as the word I has changed its meaning. An author's word choice is usually very specific and purposeful, and throughout Orr's narrative he utilizes words in different ways in order to expose changes within Greg. Throughout Orr's narrative, I felt as though I understood who Greg was and why he developed into the person he ultimately became. Orr effectively established this character development through his compelling use of various literary elements. When writing my own narratives or essays of self-representation, I plan on adopting a few of Orr's techniques because they achieve the outcome I hope to accomplish. One of the most effective techniques was utilizing first-person point-of-view narration because it allowed the readers to see Greg's pure, unaltered thoughts and emotions. In addition to point of view, Orr choosing to repeat the word I throughout his narrative immensely aided in Greg's characterization. Although I would not employ the word I as frequently as Orr, I would choose specific words that would aid in my self-characterization, similarly to how Orr's word choice aided in his characterization. These two methods are very general techniques that can be tailored to accomplish a specific goal. By learning from Orr's successes, I can incorporate his techniques into my writing to achieve the same level of success. Experienced writers like Gregory Orr do not include or exclude anything by accident. Instead, they make choices while writing that allow them to convey exactly what they want. These choices result in readers having a clearer understanding of the characters and plot, which allows the writer to easily communicate with the readers. Orr's very specific word choice, along with his inclusion of Greg's thoughts, leads the reader through the story in the exact way that Orr intended. Had Orr just told this narrative in terms of plot development or dialogue, readers could never have the understanding of Greg that they do after reading this excerpt from The Blessing. This event had immeasurable effects on Greg, and Orr made that clear through the huge amount of development this character experienced within an extremely short period of time. From the beginning of the hunting trip through telling his story, Greg matured and became much more selfless than he had been in the beginning, and this is made extremely clear through the things Orr chose to include or exclude.